The phone rang again. Third time. Still no answer. On the screen glowed a familiar name, Muhammad Ali. It was late, 11 p.m., inside Joe Frazier's quiet Philadelphia gym. The call was the 15th in 8 months. Joe stared at it, jaw tight, memory heavier than iron. Finally, he picked up. What? His voice was granite. Joe! Ali's words trembled through the line. Parkinson's rang every syllable. Please, I need to see you. No. Flat. Final. We got nothing to talk about. I'm begging you. Joe exhaled sharply. You begged once before, in Manila. Then the cameras came and you called me a gorilla again. I'm done. Click. Two warriors who had nearly destroyed each other in the ring were now trapped in a different battle. This one had no bell, no referee, just words sharp enough to scar bone. Joe sat alone, surrounded by photographs. March 8, 1971, the fight of the century. January 28, 1974, the rematch. October 1975, Thrilla in Manila. 3 wars, 3 fragments of his soul. His son Marvis stepped in. Dad, who was it? Nobody. Marvis glanced at the screen. That's the 5th time this week. Maybe you should... Don't. Joe's tone cut clean. You weren't there. You didn't hear what he said about me. Uncle Tom, ignorant, ugly, said I had no brains, and the world believed him. He swallowed hard. They loved him. They hated me. Too black for one side, not black enough for the other. I was just Joe Frazier, and he made sure that's all I'd ever be. The next morning, Joe ran through Philadelphia's cracked sidewalks, 57 years old, still training, still punishing himself with motion. He remembered Madison Square Garden, 15 rounds, that left hook in the 15th, Ali hitting canvas. Victory, yes, but hollow, because even defeated, Ali owned the spotlight. Joe stopped in front of the old gym where he trained as a boy, 15 years old, broke, furious at the world. Boxing was oxygen. When he became champion, he thought respect would follow. Then Ali returned from exile, and everything shifted. A black limousine waited outside his gym later that day. Beside it stood Lonnie Ali. My husband is dying, she said softly. Joe froze. Parkinson's is winning. He says your name every day. Please, I'm not asking you to forgive him. Just let him apologize face to face. Joe looked away. He had 30 years. Lonnie handed him an envelope. Read it. Inside, shaky handwriting. Dear Joe, I was wrong. I attacked you with words because I was afraid. You were the toughest man I ever fought. You deserved respect. I don't have much time. Please let me see you once more. Your brother in battle, Muhammad. Joe crumpled it, then smoothed it back out. That night, sleep refused him.
He saw Manila again. Heat like a furnace. Round after round of brutality. By the 14th, both men were ruinous silhouettes. Eddie Futch stopped it before 15. Joe never forgot the pain, or the pride. 3 days passed. Then his daughter Jackie spoke quietly. Dad, I saw him. He looks fragile. Someone mentioned your name. He cried. Joe sat down slowly. Forgiveness isn't for him, she said. It's for you. He called. I'll come tomorrow, Joe said. Just us, he added. No cameras. Michigan was quiet, suburban, ordinary. Ali was not. Thin, trembling, eyes luminous with something softer than pride. Joe, he whispered. Joe felt 30 years collapse inward. The insults, the fury, the bruised dignity. Gone. He knelt. Ali's hand shook as Joe held it. And just like that, something ancient fractured and dissolved. I'm sorry, Ali repeated. I know, Joe said. Hours passed. Joe talked about pain, about humiliation, about being reduced to a villain in someone else's legend. Ali listened, tears streaming. He wrote slowly on paper. You were the greatest warrior I faced. Forgive me. I forgive you, Joe said. Ali pressed Joe's hand to his forehead, a silent bow. Respect. They ate together, quiet, surreal. In Ali's study, he revealed 3 keepsakes, a 1971 headline of Frazier's victory, a smiling photo from 1985, and a gold necklace engraved, Joe Frazier, the real champion.
Made in 1976. Never delivered. Joe put it on. I'll wear it forever. Ali smiled. A real one. At 2 a.m., they watched Manila again. We almost killed each other, Joe murmured. Ali wrote, Brothers born in fire. Joe nodded. Yeah, brothers. The hate Joe carried for decades loosened its grip that night. He felt lighter, unburdened. 2 weeks later, Joe shocked reporters. Muhammad Ali is my brother, he said. We hurt each other, but that's over. The world blinked. They visited often after that. Words became unnecessary. They held hands, watched old tapes, sometimes fell asleep in the same room, like weary siblings. In 2011, Joe was diagnosed with liver cancer. Ali insisted on visiting. In the hospital room, they touched foreheads. I'm scared, Joe whispered. Ali mouthed softly, Don't be. I'll see you again. Promise? A nod. Joe Frazier died November 7th, 2011. Ali called him the greatest fighter I ever faced. At the funeral, Ali placed his hand over his heart. Brother. 5 years later, on June 3rd, 2016, Muhammad Ali passed away. At his funeral, Marvis Frazier said, My father called him brother, and Ali proved it. Because in the end, their greatest victory wasn't in Madison Square Garden, not in Manila. It was in forgiveness. 2 men forged in violence, refined by time, redeemed by humility. Not enemies, brothers.
And maybe that's the part people miss. We remember the knockdowns, the trash talk, the brutality, but we forget the silence that followed. After the cameras dimmed and the crowds disappeared, what remained wasn't rivalry, it was recognition. 2 men who had excavated each other's limits, 2 spirits tempered in the same furnace. Joe once admitted something quietly to a close friend. Fighting Ali made me immortal, but forgiving him made me free. That's not something you hear in highlight reels. Ali, even as his body betrayed him, carried that reconciliation like a medal no one else could see. When visitors came, he would sometimes gesture toward the framed photo from Manila. If they asked about it, he'd write slowly, That was my brother. No theatrics, no poetry, just truth. Years after both men were gone, people still debate who truly won their trilogy. Was it Frazier, who dropped Ali in 1971? Was it Ali, who endured and adapted? Was it Manila, that near-mythic crucible where both men left pieces of themselves under the Philippine sun? The answer is less statistical than spiritual. They both won, and they both lost. They lost years to pride, to ego, to words flung like daggers in front of flashing cameras. But they won something rarer in the end, mutual absolution. That's harder than throwing a left hook, harder than surviving 15 rounds in suffocating heat, harder than being the greatest. If you study their story closely, you see a pattern. Competition created greatness, conflict created resentment, time created perspective, and suffering created empathy. Ali's illness humbled the most flamboyant athlete of the 20th century. Joe's cancer softened a man who had carried indignation like armor. And somewhere between trembling hands and hospital rooms, they rediscovered what the ring had given them in the first place. Respect. Not performative, not public. Real. There's a photograph taken late in their lives. No championship belts, no gloves. Just 2 aging men seated close, hands clasped. It doesn't look historic. It looks human. And maybe that's the point, because the loudest chapters of their story were never the most important ones. The quiet ending was. The apology, the embrace, the whispered promise, I'll see you again. In boxing, you're taught to protect yourself at all times. In life, sometimes you have to do the opposite. You have to lower your guard. Ali and Frazier spent years proving how much punishment a man could endure. Then they proved something even more difficult, how much grace a man can give. And that's why their story still resonates, not because they fought, but because they forgave. And forgiveness didn't erase the past. It reframed it. The bruises still happened, the insults were still spoken, the pain was real. But pain, when revisited with honesty, becomes perspective.
People often talk about legacy in terms of belts, titles, and records. 20 wins, 30 knockouts, 3 epic wars. But legacy is quieter than that. Legacy is who shows up when the lights are off, who answers the phone after decades of silence, who walks into a hospital room when pride says stay home. That's where greatness reveals itself. When historians speak about Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, they often dissect tactics: Ali's footwork, Frazier's left hook, the rope-a-dope, the relentless pressure. But beneath the technical analysis was something far more elemental. Two men from humble beginnings, two black champions navigating a divided America, two different personalities forced into the same orbit. They weren't just fighting each other, they were carrying history, identity, expectation. And sometimes when pressure becomes unbearable, it spills over into cruelty. Ali weaponized words, Frazier internalized wounds. For years that tension calcified, until illness dissolved it. When Ali passed in 2016, tributes flooded in from presidents, actors, athletes, and world leaders. The planet mourned a global icon. But in Philadelphia, in quiet neighborhoods where Joe once ran at dawn, the story felt more personal. Because the final chapter had already been written 5 years earlier, when Joe closed his eyes, knowing the man who once mocked him now called him brother. That's symmetry. That's peace.
There's something almost poetic about it. They met in violence. They parted in tenderness. The same hands that once tried to knock each other unconscious eventually held each other steady. No championship ceremony could rival that image. No roaring crowd could amplify that moment. Just two aging warriors, breathing, remembering, understanding. So when people argue about who was better, who hit harder, who deserved more credit, maybe the better question is this: who grew more? Because in the end, both men transcended the personas they created. Ali wasn't just the greatest. He was a man who learned humility. Frazier wasn't just the relentless challenger. He was a man who learned release. And together, they taught something that goes beyond sport. That rivalry can elevate you, but reconciliation completes you. Every generation finds its own champions, its own conflicts, its own grudges. But the lesson remains timeless. Strength isn't only measured by how hard you can hit. It's measured by how deeply you can forgive. Ali and Frazier gave the world unforgettable fights, but their final gift was something far more enduring. They showed that even after the harshest battles, even after words that cut like blades, even after decades of distance, it is never too late to make peace with your brother. And maybe that's why their story refuses to fade. Not because of the knockdowns, not because of the headlines, not even because of the trilogy that defined an era, but because of what happened after the applause stopped. In quiet living rooms, in hospital corridors, in the stillness of late-night reflection. That's where the real championship was decided. No judges, no scorecards, no belts held high. Just two men choosing grace over grievance. Think about it. For years, the narrative was simple. Ali, the charismatic genius, Frazier, the relentless aggressor. But history softens sharp edges. It reminds us that every rivalry has two beating hearts inside it. Two families, two fragile egos trying to survive the weight of public opinion. Ali's wit dazzled the world. Frazier's silence bore the burden. And silence can be heavy. He carried it for decades, until one trembling phone call changed everything. What makes their reconciliation extraordinary isn't that it happened, it's that it almost didn't. Pride is stubborn. Hurt is adhesive. Time moves fast. One unanswered call, one unopened letter, one missed visit, and the story ends differently. But it didn't, because somewhere between anger and age, wisdom appeared. When Ali whispered brother, it wasn't theatrical. There were no cameras crafting mythology. It was fragile, imperfect, human, and that's what makes it powerful. Legends are often placed on pedestals, untouchable, mythic. But in those final years, both men stepped down from the pedestal and stood eye to eye as equals. No stage lights, no microphones,
just memory. If you study their trilogy, you'll see momentum shifts, power exchanges, moments where either could have broken, but neither did. And that same resilience carried into their final chapter. They refused to let bitterness be the final word. That takes more courage than any punch thrown in Madison Square Garden, more stamina than 15 brutal rounds in Manila heat. Because forgiving someone who wounded your pride, that's a different kind of endurance. Years from now, new fighters will rise. Records will be broken, speeds will increase, techniques will evolve. But the Ali-Frazier saga will remain essential, not just for its violence, but for its mercy. They showed that rivalry can forge greatness, but reconciliation forges legacy. So maybe the ultimate lesson isn't about boxing at all. Maybe it's about us, the grudges we rehearse, the apologies we postpone, the calls we don't return. Time doesn't negotiate. Illness doesn't wait. And pride rarely comforts you in the end. But forgiveness? Forgiveness liberates. Two men entered the ring as opponents. They left the world as brothers. And somewhere, beyond cameras and commentary, beyond history books and highlight reels, they are remembered not just for how fiercely they fought, but for how deeply they forgave. And if you sit with that long enough, it changes something inside you. Because their story stops being about boxing. It becomes a mirror. We all have a Joe. Someone we feel misunderstood us, disrespected us, took something from us. And sometimes we all have a little bit of Ali in us too. Proud, sharp-tongued, unwilling to admit we went too far. Years pass. The anger becomes familiar, almost comfortable, until one day you realize it's heavy, heavier than any punch ever thrown. When people replay the trilogy, the wars at Madison Square Garden, the rematch, the brutal heat of Manila, they talk about strategy. But the final chapter required something neither man trained for: vulnerability. Ali, once the loudest voice in any room, reduced to a whisper. Frazier, once fueled by fury, choosing softness. That reversal might be the most astonishing comeback of all. There's something sacred about two rivals sitting quietly together. No need to prove anything. No need to dominate. Just presence. Just acknowledgement. Just the understanding that the other man pushed you to a place no one else could. Without Frazier, Ali isn't fully Ali. Without Ali, Frazier isn't fully Frazier. They sharpened each other. They scarred each other. They completed each other. And maybe that's the paradox of greatness. The people who challenge you the hardest often shape you the deepest. It's uncomfortable. It's messy. It's painful. But it's transformative. In the end, there were no more interviews needed. No more press conferences. No more clever lines. Just two aging warriors who had outlived the noise. When Ali could barely speak. When Frazier's body was failing. Their silence said more than any trash talk ever did. It said, "We survived. We understand. We forgive." History will always remember the knockdowns. But heaven, perhaps, remembers the handshake. And if there's a final image that defines them, it isn't a left hook or a rope-a-dope.
It's a trembling hand reaching out, and another hand taking it. No audience. No spotlight. Just brotherhood. That's why this story endures. Because titles fade. Records fall. Crowds disperse. But reconciliation echoes. And somewhere in that echo is a reminder. The greatest fight you will ever win might not be against your rival. It might be against your own pride.